Take us back in time a little bit. In the early 19th century, as you show, there was an enormous amount of anti-Catholic bigotry in the United States. And, immigrants from Germany or Ireland were often the targets of really outrageous hostility. And then that starts to shift in the late 19th century. And it seems that the new quote unquote threat is Chinese immigrants. Now, what is it about Chinese immigrants that Americans found so threatening, and how did this shift occur from concerns about Catholicism to concerns about the new wave of Chinese immigrants?
Xenophobia works in so many ingenious ways. It's about demonizing foreigners based on allegedly, inferior or dangerous traits, and then describing an entire group and maligning an entire group based on those traits. And it could be national origin, religion, class, gender, sexual orientation, but it's always been consistently centered around race. The big change that happens is the ability of white immigrants from Europe, to become naturalized citizens and to vote. And with that political power, one becomes, one has a seat at the table, one is able to help shape future policy and to lessen the impact on xenophobia on their community. If you have votes to offer to politicians, and then when you yourself become a politician, it's all about power. Chinese immigrants were the first group of immigrants to come in large numbers, not from Europe. And because the existing laws, based all the way back in the 1790 Naturalization Act, barred non-whites from becoming naturalized citizens, Chinese were automatically going to be second-class citizens along the lines of Native Americans and African Americans. So it's not only their, perceived racial difference, but also how our existing laws, and then reaffirmed in the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, barred them from naturalized citizenship and from progressing in the same ways that Irish, Italian, Jewish, other immigrants from Europe could in terms of climbing that political ladder.
But your work shows us also that by the 1920s, even those groups, Eastern European Jews, Irish immigrants, other groups are suspect, right? It goes, the suspicion and the concern about the increase in immigration and its effect on American culture and perhaps the economy grows even beyond the perceived threat of immigrants from China. So by the 1920s, we enter a new era of lockdown. Can you tell us how we got there? What's the intellectual foundation of that movement? Why do we get that anti-immigration movement so strongly in the 1920s?
Yeah, immigrants from Southern, Eastern, Central Europe are called racial inferiors. They're still white, but they're not the right kind of white, which is white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. This is all about the ways in which immigration begins to intersect with and drive the science of eugenics, this idea, the scientific racism that identified humans into different categories and then classified them based on a hierarchy of race.